Can you hear me now? Great. Okay. By my watch, it's 4 minutes past, but let's kick off. Thanks very much for attending. My name is Francis. I'm here with my colleague Pierre-Antoine as well. I'm going to be talking today about a project we did to do with earthquakes. So just a very brief introduction to us. So SIA is a management consultancy. We are doing a lot in the data and AI space. We have over 400 people worldwide. We're exhibiting at the AWS Zone today. We've done a lot on Gen AI and other types of machine learning as well. So the case I'm going to talk to you today is all about trying to use computer vision models to understand the extent of damage using satellite imagery. And the particular earthquake we chose to do this, this was just an R&D proof of concept project. But the data we used here was from an earthquake that happened. 1 second. Okay. So yeah, the particular case we used was an earthquake in Turkey. It happened in February, and actually, I guess it just shows the challenge of this kind of thing, that there was a snowstorm that happened right around the same time. So it's really we chose the two cities we chose because there was no snow. So lots of challenges there. What we did is we built a pipeline, and the rest of my presentation, I'm just going to take you through the pipeline that we built and kind of describe the different steps and the kind of what we learned going along. And just to start off with, we did a little bit of pre-processing, so standardization of the data so that it would go into the machine learning models later down the line. And then also, we increased a little bit the contrast, local contrast of the image, so it would work better. So firstly into the inference step. So like many teams, we wanted to use large language models, or in this case, vision language models, to see basically how can we get the most, how can we get a good result with relatively little effort. And so we used a VLM to do two different things. One was create a preliminary report, and the second is to get an initial score of damage. So this is the preliminary report. So it's quite a lot of text to read, but it's successful in describing at a high level the disruption of some buildings, disruption to the road network as well. The next thing we did was a little bit more complicated. For this part, what we did is we split up the image into tiles of 100 meters by 100 meters. And then for each of those tiles, we did a separate call to the VLM. And what we included in the prompt was the before image, the after image, and some examples. And what we were basically asking the VLM was, how much damage is there pre versus post? So total damage, partial damage, or no damage at all. And while by no means perfect, this was actually quite an effective way to get an initial view. You can see it on the right-hand side of the chart of where in the area of interest there was damage. Okay, so we've done an initial view. Then the second step, and this is maybe a step that you'd want to take once you've used the first VLM step to identify kind of those areas where there is damage and there's probably more analysis to be done. The second step we did was building detection. And we actually used two separate models for this. So the first model, grounding Dino, was for identifying a bounding box. So a bounding box in which there's a building. And then we complemented this with a second model to, within that bounding box, identify the shape of the building. Now, if you've got good eyesight, you can see that the performance of these models was okay, but by no means great. Keep in mind that this was a POC project, and the training data of these models was ImageNet. So these models weren't trained specifically on satellite data. So we believe that if we were to retrain a model with a similar architecture, you'll get much better performance. So we've done some pre-processing. We've done some initial use of the VLM to both do the preliminary report and also the technique with the tiles. And then lastly, we've identified the shape of the buildings within the given tile. The last step we have is a post-processing step. And so then in this post-processing step, once we'd identified the shape of the buildings, you can essentially, within that area, you can calculate the area of the buildings in that within that tile. And that allows you to go, again, pre versus post, estimate the area of the roof before and the area of the roof after, and calculate what proportion of the buildings have been destroyed, because you can see where there were roofs before and not after. And this gave us a more accurate view of the extent of the damage in these very small areas. So just to conclude, we're using satellite data after an earthquake, and we're getting very quickly, this is all models that you can run relatively quickly after, the data comes quickly and you can run the models relatively quickly as well. Three useful outputs. So the first a qualitative description from the VLM of what has happened in a particular area. The second, also using a VLM, is to give a coarse view of the extent of damage in the different areas by using the prompt and the examples. And then the last output was the more detailed view using the models, the building detection models, to calculate the proportion of buildings that have been destroyed. So we thought this was really interesting, fun project to work on, and also very applicable to situations in insurance where there's a need for a fast insight into the amount of damage, and being able to use that for various response efforts to this type of catastrophe. So that's it. Thanks very much. My name is Francis. I think we've got a couple of minutes for questions. So if anyone does have a question, I'd be very, very happy to take it. Otherwise, yeah, please feel free to come up and say hi. We've also got a booth in the middle of the AWS zone. So if you want to talk about this particular project in computer vision or the other projects we've been doing, very happy to talk about those. Thanks very much.
Just bear with us a moment, and Kirstin will be along shortly. I think she's just gone to get her notes. So just bear with us a moment, and she'll be here. I know. Here we are, ladies and gentlemen. This is the final presentation on the Supplier Showcase stage.
Afternoon, ladies and gentlemen. Can you all hear me okay? Excellent. How many of you were in my last session only about 4 minutes ago, and I'm not really quite sure what topic I'm excellent, fantastic. I promise not to repeat what I just did for the last hour. So, my name's Kirstin Duffield. I'm the CEO of Morning Data, which is part of Verisk, and it's really strange presenting with all that background noise that you can't hear because you've got headphones on. This is quite actually bizarre. But anyway, so what I'm going to talk to you today about is the advantages of using standards and things like the CDR, things like ISO, things like the Accord, reference lists, etc., and how Verisk as an organization has benefited with being able to adopt those and taking them on into the market, and how we've been able to put that together across our product range. So if I start with the little circle on the left-hand side, this is our EOS onboarding app. This allows organizations, whether they're carriers, whether they are brokers, whether they're TPAs, to digitally onboard their trading partners. Licensing requirements, sanctions requirements, etc. But right from the outset, we've designed it to collect data in a CDR compliant manner. People will ask, well, CDR, isn't that associated with Blueprint 2? Isn't that something that I don't need to worry about till post-bind? Is it just for, after I've done all the placing activities, etc.? Well, if you don't want to rekey the name and address of the policyholder in 35 different systems, as I've just heard from some of my esteemed colleagues in our last session, you need to capture that data in the same way once and use it as you go through the entire life cycle of the insurance and reinsurance profile. So EOS onboarding allows us to use some of the exciting tools that you can embed. We can augment data. we can use AI, we can cut people into different channels, we can collect information about them, and then we can move that data onto the next system in the chain. Now, it doesn't necessarily mean that that user seamlessly moves between onboarding to our rulebook quote and bind solution, for example, but what we're doing here is we're showing data being reused. So data that was collected about the policyholder or perhaps your agent, your broker, your seeding broker, every element of the partners that you're doing business with can now be shared across the landscape. So once we are now moving that data into our quote and bind, those carriers that we're going to be able to have as facility capacity behind, we're going to collect the data about things like vessel data, about property data in a templated and repeatable way. There are only so many data points you can collect about something. I mean, we do try and make life difficult by looking for data that probably has a limited value. But if somebody says, I want to know the color of the door because black doors are burgled more often than red doors, somebody somewhere will want to collect the color of the door. But at least you will know in a data model that is extendable and that is repeatable throughout the entire landscape, you will know where that property of the property exists in that data model. Not everybody wants to get their fingers involved in data models, but if you understand the nature of it, it helps you move through. You're then going to move that same data for a bound risk, for example, into the core PAS system. Again, no rekeying. But at this point now, we can start to automate billing. We can then connect up to open banking. We can receive payments. We can speed up that back office process that is going on behind the scenes. If, for example, something is going to fall outside the terms of the binder or it's open market, we can then share that data to build a complete contract sitting in white space, for example. So your draft contract is coming straight out of the data. You're not asking anybody to free format text, using templates, auto tagging, and your approach to standard data. I asked the last group, when was the last time that you actually didn't use GBP as a currency code? Frighteningly, less than 12 months ago, I saw a slip with STG stuck on the top. So we are still having aspects that we need to embrace to get over the line. So we can then move that draft contract. Now the carrier is wanting to get hold of our data, but we're not in control of the carrier. We're not in control as the broker of what the carrier wants to see. So we need consistency. The inception date needs to be understood. The country code for the location of the property needs to be understood as opposed to the location of the policyholder. So all of these pieces of data need to have their context. They need to know what they belong to. In the last session, I talked about, well, if you had 100, 200, centigrade, 12, and pink, could you make a cupcake out of it? No, we need to understand the context of flour, time, ingredients, etc., to be able to put those things together. And then finally, once that underwriter has got that consistency and can pull that data down, we are able to then share that with other systems. For example, here we're talking about impact exposure management. Now, Verisk is a very large company, and it has lots of fingers in lots of pies. And in America, it is very strong. Its main activities is in data itself. Here in the UK, we are more about software. So we are looking at how we can leverage standards to give people an entire one-stop shop for being able to go or pick and choose the components out of that landscape and know that they're using industry standards, global standards. They're using reference data that will advise and keep you protected so that when you select items off a drop-down list, you're actually going to end up with that being understood. Now, some of this might seem as though to a backdrop of agentic AI and all the other exciting tools that you've been hearing about here to go, well, hang on a minute, we were saying that in about 1995. Yeah, that's my point. We've been saying it in the 1990s and the 1980s, but all of the elements that you experience with things like AI need to be built on good data foundations. I think we are all beginning to experience how AI draws hands at the moment, or we're having a conversation and get some very peculiar answers. And that's not to say that these things won't improve exponentially over the next 6 to 9 months or beyond. But if you actually think about it, when we come back to things like how much water is used because people are polite to chatbots, now just think of how you roll that back to say, why are we wasting money? Why are we wasting energy transferring or mapping data that is obvious? So this presentation is purely about introducing you to Verisk as a whole, introducing you to maybe something you might take away to your organizations and say, actually, some of these things are very straightforward. They are not complicated to start cleaning up what goes on in your own real estate. And once you have got good governance and good internal elements, you can put a landscape together that means you put in data once, and you can now see that flow through every single system that you have in your real estate. You may not necessarily select each of them from a Verisk product, but you should be asking your vendors, how are you adopting standards? How are you being able to allow me to put data in once and never rekey the same piece of data again? I want to see that flowing through. I want to see how that will give my advantage in the marketplace. So, does anyone here feel as though their real estate, their data environment is perfect? It's fairly universal to understand that we probably think that it's not great. Is anyone actively doing a project about data governance that embraces external and internal reference data? Thank you, Richard, from within inside the Verisk environment. That was duly and perfectly put your hand up. It is something your vendors should be doing with you. It's something where the vendors can adopt and help and guide you through choices that are not necessarily in the underwriter's world. They're not necessarily in the broker's world. Some of the larger brokers and underwriters do indeed have internal IT teams, internal data teams, but many don't. And therefore, working in collaboration with clients is going to be something that is really important. So if we take that on another step and say, well, okay, what does that look like if I'm taking a real estate potentially from one vendor, but not necessarily? Other vendors do exist. However, it's the responsibility of vendors to look at how their internal system, their systems that they're bringing to the market are actually integrated. But as they are not the only vendors on the list, they need to play nicely with other vendors on the list. They need to be able to take out the idea that there may be an external MDM that they need to plug into and use data from. They may want to use gateways going into other areas within the market. They may want to use bordereau dissemination companies such as Viper, for example. They may want to use third-party BPO services. All these things are a reality that we need to face as vendors, and we need to embrace them and be able to accommodate them. But then there's also the unknowns. So we need to be flexible enough, but committed to guide our clients into the best way to address the majority of all the use cases that they're going to be presented with. So, benefits of a Verisk landscape, and that doesn't say every single Verisk application uses a single data model, but there is similarities between them, so it makes that adoption across a landscape much easier. When we're looking at a single dictionary of concepts, CDR compliant, CDR is still relatively new. People haven't necessarily fully adopted it. So this is work in progress. But your vendors should be doing this for you. You should be working in collaboration with them to get that foundational piece in place. When you're talking about a single hub of integrated solutions, it doesn't have to be just from one software house. That may have distinct advantages. But it could be you want somebody who is going to be able to work with other suppliers that are in that landscape. Use of global and industry standards, a bit basic for an event like this, but a lot of the market hasn't even got that far, so we need to be able to push that. No rekeying reduces errors, and also the reuse of data in third-party systems. So, connected operations matter. We need to deliver products faster. Clients are wanting it, our clients, but also our broking clients. Their clients are wanting to get their quotes quicker. The challenge is we have fragmented systems, inconsistent data, manual processes often create friction. This is probably phrased in 1900 different ways, an incredibly common aspect we all talk about at every one of these lovely conferences that we all get together with. Yeah. So, technical upgrade and a strategic shift. So we're looking to seamlessly collaborate. Firms can unlock accuracy. All these aspects that are, as I said, can be considered by some to be basic when you're wanting to come along and see what the disruptive technology is with agentic AI. Verisk does that too. But if we don't get those foundations right, we're building on molasses. We're building on something that is only going to get in a wonderful sort of funnel of greater inaccuracies and a reliance on data we can't be sure about. So the common theme throughout to make this possible is data. And without that, you are then saying this is a leap from jobs to be done to jobs to be won. Winning time for strategy and innovation, not admin. We're looking for things where we can put it in once, reuse it, slice, dice it, be able to control what that data does, the internal elements and the external reference list. You have no control over the currency codes or country codes. You need to use them as they are and not try to manipulate them for your own gains. But your own internal reference data is one that you need to put governance in place with. But your vendors should be able to help you decide what is internal reference, what is actually going to benefit you long term. And winning profitable growth instead of idle capital. At the end of the day, we're all here to make profit, and the management of data can often eat into that hugely. Thank you for your time, guys. I hope I've given you just a little bit of something to walk away with, but also a short introduction into Verisk if you haven't met us before. Thank you.